Hi, everybody. You found me at See Nicole Read, and I'm here with Laura from Laura's Library Card, and we're going to discuss a book that we have read together, You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson.
How did you hear about this book, Nicole?
Actually, you told me about it.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yes, I had been seeing it places, but it was just sort of like a blip on my radar, and I hadn't really considered it or even thought about picking it up until you suggested it, squeezing it into one of the categories on the Summer Fling Readathon.
Okay.
So same question, how did you hear about it?
I saw it a lot on BookTube. I was just getting a bunch of positive reviews. I think it's very new, published this year. So I think that there were a lot of people who kind of came on their radar with June being both Pride Month and with all the Black Lives Matters happening. I think people were just like, this is a great book. Everyone should pick it up. So do you want me to do a quick summary?
Sure, that would be great.
So this book follows our main character, Liz Leidy. She's in high school and music is her passion. When she finds out that she did not receive the scholarship from her college of choice, where she's just been always dreaming to go, she is devastated because how is she going to be able to afford to go there? So then she remembers that prom is a really big freaking deal in her town. And that if you are elected prom queen, then you will get a big scholarship money to go toward college. So her new goal, even though she's kind of introverted, has some anxiety, and is Black and queer, secretly queer, she decides to go out for the prom queen and joins in puts her name in the running so that she can win the scholarship. So that's sort of the premise of the book.
And I'll say that prom at her school is significantly or prom queen, being on the court is a significantly bigger deal than it was when I was in high school. Like, people have to, in Liz's world, you have to get signatures and you have to do so many volunteer hours and you have to help in the school and really campaign, where when I was in high school, there was like, you voted. That was
right.
You got your picture taken and a crown if you won.
Right.
It wasn't. And I can see how there would be a scholarship that comes out of it because there's certainly more involved in it.
Yeah, and there was even a GPA factor
right.
at Liz's school.
You got more points the higher GPA you had.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, same here. Prom was a big deal amongst the student population just because it was the social event of the year. But at the same time, yeah, it was much more important to that you had a date and that you had a dress, and it better not be the same dress as anybody else, and but there was no scholarship, and it was all just like a popularity contest. I think you had to be nominated maybe ahead of time, but that was it was all popularity.
Yeah, but I think you had to be nominated by vote. I think, I don't
know. Yeah, something like that. So what did you think of the setting and the writing?
It was really, I know it was meant to sort of make Liz stick out, but she was pretty much the polar opposite of everybody else in her town. I even wrote down, she described herself as tall, Black, and broke, where it made it sound like most of the other people in the school were Caucasian. And she talks about her friends' houses. They live basically in mansions and gated communities, and their parents spend all kind of money and they have parties. And she didn't even want people to come to her house to see her.
Right.
So immediately, that not only is she Black and everybody else is white, but she's also poor. Her mother has passed away. She's just the total opposite of everybody that she's in school with. And I really think the author kind of hit that home. You really knew that. There was no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like in an anime, when you see the one character with bright pink hair, you're like, I think that's the main character, and everyone else is just
out here. Yeah.
I felt like the setting was pretty nondescript. It was just sort of this Midwestern town, but you're right, I felt like Liz really did stand out, and I think that was part of her character, is that she always felt not accepted by other people. And that was partly because she did literally check other boxes than other people. But at the same time, I kind of wondered how much of that was her own doing. She talked a little bit about how she had a really great friendship with Gabby. She had a really great friendship with Jordan. And then like basically the first day of high school when Jordan kind of rejected her a little bit, that just like kind of like ruined her high school, you know, going forward and her own attitude. And so like self-fulfilling prophecy, did she kind of cut herself out and cut herself away from other people?
I agree with you because for the most part, you know, prior to some things that happen while she's running for prom queen, there was really only one girl that she described as sort of being mean to her through middle school and into high school.
Mm-hmm.
I think her name was Rachel. Am I correct?
I think so.
Yeah. And so she describes Rachel as not liking her and being mean to her and pretty much going out of her way to be mean to her. And there was a situation with Jordan where some older boys were kind of mean to her. But I think that pretty much everybody across any sort of, no matter what box you check, anybody can relate to that, or somebody's just, you don't even know and they're being unkind to you.
Yeah.
But even though, so she, you know, she kind of feels like she sticks out and she's sort of removed herself a little bit socially. She doesn't really describe that people were mean to her,
yeah,
or unkind to her, or really treated her differently, except for those few little instances. Do you agree? Or
yeah, no, I agree. I felt like it sort of started off that way, where like when in the first couple chapters, she sort of describes herself as, well, I have me and my like 2 friends and that's it. And then as the book goes on, it's sort of shown multiple times. And I think Liz realizes this herself, as well as the reader realizes this, that she has a lot more support. Like as she realizes that other people and groups in the school are supporting her and have pins of her face or have told her that they support her in her campaign, she realizes that like she isn't as isolated as she thought she was. She has people in the band who have supported her and who really come through for her. There's even people who are also campaigning to be prom queen, who are sort of like she viewed as like Rachel's like minions, but who like help her out, you know, with the dress scene and putting on her makeup and stuff. So I felt like at the start of the book, yeah, she really did, from her perspective, she was really isolated, but throughout the book she kind of realizes, and we realize, how many other people support her.
that kind of leads me to a question that I wanted to ask you. So I don't want to say you pitched it to me this way, but when you suggested I read it for the summer fling, which were all romances, I was expecting there to be like a little bit greater romance element in this, which is maybe my fault. I didn't know that much about it going in, but
Yeah.
I would really more, even though, you know, there is some romance, she's figuring out her attraction to girls and she gets a girlfriend, but I would really call this more of like a coming of age story, and, you know,
Yeah.
figuring out who you are. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I have not read very many romance young adult books where the romance is the only feature.
Right.
I guess I might have pitched this to you without even saying that it was YA. I think when I said, hey, let's read this, I was like, here's your copy, boom, and that was sort of it. So it wasn't really a surprise to me, the amount of romance that was in this story, that it wasn't like a stronger plot line. So I sort of, a little bit of a spoiler alert here, but one of the things that happens in this book is Liz has a crush on a new student who is new to the school, who also is competing for prom queen, and their relationship sort of develops as the story goes along, and that's the romance subplot. One of my frustrations was I 100% understood her feelings for Amanda, the crush, but I felt like Liz like ditched her prom queen scheme like too quickly. Like she was like, had so many feelings for Mac that she was like, yeah, I know I need that scholarship for like my life, but like did you feel like she kind of like gave up on being prom queen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was probably because I don't think that her, like, obviously her end goal was not to become prom queen. The end goal was that scholarship.
Right.
She wasn't in it to be prom queen. So maybe her heart wasn't in it for that reason. But then I also think when I was in high school and I would, I had a crush on somebody, it was sort of like, sorry, friends, sorry, homework,
Yeah.
sorry, sports, or whatever. Like, he's interested in me. I got to go.
So, did you feel there were romantic tensions between Liz and Jordan?
I I did. And
Yeah.
I kind of like chalked it up to um, hormones and how comfortable you feel with someone who knows you so well, even if it's been a long period of time.
Yeah.
Like Jordan was her best friend for years. He became friends with her. Jordan and Liz were friends, and he saw her through her mother's death and knew about her brother's illness. And there's still like a comfort in knowing that, even if it's years ago. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that history is a pull.
Yeah. So I
Mhm.
could see how easy it was for her to slide back into that relationship with him, even though it was flirtatious, not romantic. Can you say
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, no,
And
I agree.
I mean, I understood it because I still do that too. Like I can slide right back into where we left off with somebody, even if it's been years. They
Yeah.
had a falling out, and
What
he
did you think of that? I so I felt like she was like, well, this thing happened between Jordan and I, and like it ruined our friendship. And then when it was finally like revealed that he just kind of pushed her, he did snub her. He pushed her away and said something hurtful on their first day of freshman year. But then like I just felt like both of them to have kind of like been like, well, we had a good run of it, 3 whole years, but like by relationship, I just
right.
kind of felt like that was a little weak. And then like even later in the book, Jordan says, well, you never responded to my letter. And that was like a betrayal from, spoiler alert, Gabby had been another, like, the third person in this friendship triangle, and Jordan had given Gabby an apology letter, and then Gabby like had sort of felt hurtful at how close Jordan and Liz were, so Gabby never passed on that apology letter. But like if Jordan was really that apologetic and really wanted to salvage that friendship, why did he never
In all
pursue
those
that?
years, try again.
Right. Like 3.5 years, and he was like, well, like Ryan Gosling wrote 365 letters. Okay, he tried
every day for a year.
That's right. I felt like Jordan could have pursued it a little bit, and Liz too. I think that she felt that snub, but like you can't just like abandon someone from a 3-year really like a best friendship over one incident.
So, what kind of growth did you see in Liz, like from where we met her in the beginning to
Mm-hmm.
where she's crowned at the end?
Oh, spoiler alert! She's
Spoiler
crowned. She
alert,
wins.
spoiler alert. This whole thing. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I felt like we kind of talked a little bit about how Liz was presented as very isolated at the start, and I felt like, and I think I said that she kind of gains friends and realizes her support group is bigger than she realized throughout the book. And I think that we see a number of instances where Liz is, I mean, she's got a lot on her plate. She's trying to, earn this scholarship and earn money. She has a family member, her brother, who's sick, so she kind of has that as a constant source of anxiety in her life, and she's trying to be the best GPA. She suddenly has new stuff with the prom queen and court on her plate, so she has a lot of anxiety, and I felt like that was done really well in the book, where we saw her take moments where she was like taking her pulse, and that was kind of how she calmed down. And I felt like she kind of got a handle on her anxiety as the book went on, and so she kind of matured into making sure she could keep dealing with that. And I also feel, go ahead.
It helped her anxiety, I think, by realizing, like you said, that her support system is larger than she realized, that she had more people in her life that wanted to help her than she knew.
Yeah.
Realizing that she wasn't alone so much helped with the anxiety, because she talks about how the anxiety started when her mother was sick, and then her mother's death, and realizing that she's not so alone anymore, I think definitely helped her manage her anxiety better.
Yeah. And I think that, like, to some extent, having Jordan come back and be an old friend returned, and also I felt like Gabby was a really interesting character in this book because Gabby's presented as her best friend who is determined to help her win prom queen at the start and is like the fiercest champion for Liz to be prom queen. But at the same time, like, Gabby was like really put a lot of pressure on Liz and was really kind of pushy in a lot of instances where I wanted Liz to tell Gabby to just back off a bit. But I felt like when it was finally revealed that Gabby had been the one to never pass on that letter from Jordan, Liz dealt with it in a mature way. Like, she kind of had words with Gabby, but then she was like, look, like, our friendship can survive this. And I think that shows the difference between what happened when her friendship with Jordan dissolved 3 years previously, where she just like kind of withdrew and was like, well, I guess that's over, and she was miserable about it, but she cut him off. Whereas when problems arose with Gabby and she felt betrayed by Gabby, she let those feelings happen, but then she also like went and talked it out with Gabby and was willing to like work toward maintaining their friendship and forgiving her. So I felt like that was showing her character growth in like her friendship that way.
Why do you think Gabby was such a hard like campaign manager for her? Do you think she was trying to redeem herself for what she'd done, keeping that letter that Jordan had written her all those years ago? Do you think that even factored in at all before we knew about the letter, or no?
I sort of took it as like Gabby, I mean, it's revealed that Gabby's parents have not been on good terms and her parents are splitting up. So I felt like there was home life issues that were happening with Gabby that Gabby did not want to focus on or be present for. And she
It was
like true
easier for her to be in control of this.
Right. And she truly loved Liz and really wanted Liz to get the scholarship. So I think that like Gabby was like, look, I know what it'll take to get prom queen. You are awesome and deserve it and should get that scholarship. If I throw myself into doing this campaigning, I won't have to be home or worrying about my parents or blah, 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 blah. And so I think that was why she flung herself so strongly into that.
I even wrote about how lonely and isolated Liz felt herself to be, despite the fact that she had this really good group of friends. Because there were two other girls along with Gabby, that even though, you know, Liz describes herself as being so different from them, they really supported her in ways that I was impressed for teenagers to do.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, they kept her secret knowing that she was queer and all these other things that she had going on in her life with her brother's health and being Black in a largely white community, that I was impressed how well they supported her for 17 and 18-year-olds. I wrote a quote here from Liz that says, silence and shame aren't the same thing, not by a long shot, but sometimes silence is simpler. And it made me really think about how different she was at the beginning of the novel, how different she viewed herself from everybody. And I really felt that going in, that Leah, the author, must have really had that line somehow in her heart to describe Liz. Because to think that you're not comfortable, you're that uncomfortable with who you are, but it's just easier and safer for you to be quiet about it.
Yeah.
And how, like, what a small mindset the community had. Right. And then how by the end, when she is, spoiler alert, someone outs her. And by the end, she owns that. She's going to go to prom with a girl. She's going to dance with a girl at prom, which she talks about was never done before. And she even has a lot of opposition from the principal.
Yeah.
And, but a large amount of the student body really supports her, and Jordan supports her. Gabby's back. She and Gabby make up and they're supporting her.
And there was all the social media aspect where they suddenly were rallying behind her and her hashtag.
And that right there, that made me so glad that I was done with high school before social media was a big thing. I mean, it existed, but people weren't recording everything and then uploading it for anybody could see that.
Yeah.
And this novel made me so glad that I went to school before all of that, and also before promposals were a big thing.
Yeah.
Like, gosh, the anxiety.
Yeah, when Liz was outed, it was very public, and it was on, I think, a prom poster from. It was never officially confirmed, but it was sort of from the antagonist of the book, and
Oh, that the racist Regina George is how they
yes,
referred to her. Yes.
yes,
So yeah, you have to have seen Mean Girls to get it, but Rachel
right,
was essentially a racist Regina George.
right, and so it was pretty like terrible to be outed. I mean, someone coming out is really a personal decision that they are responsible for making, and so it's really a terrible thing for someone else to out, Liz. But I thought that it was really good that the social media like showed all the support for her, like her. That was just another way to where the social media like showed that Liz had a bigger support group than she originally thought.
It was like a positive social media outpouring rather
Right.
than, people filming or photographing. I guess it would be recording or photographing like the defacement of her poster.
Right.
And instead, she got a hashtag and people were sharing it and supporting her.
Yeah.
And that, I think that really gave her the courage in the end to go to the prom with Mac.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would agree. Yeah. And we didn't, I think we've pretty much covered everything. The only area we haven't really talked much about is her family and how her brother was sick and how she and her brother were living with their grandparents because their mother had already passed away years previously because of the same illness, which was sickle cell. I felt like that was, I don't really have that much to say about that, but it's a major source of anxiety for Liz.
And it was another, like when you think about how much she really had going on, it was like, oh my gosh, another thing that she's dealing with. Like, it's no wonder she deals with these anxiety and panic attacks and these waves of nausea that when you think about everything that this really young girl is working through, it was just amazing. And she still managed to go to school every day and have like really high GPA. And she composed a beautiful piece for the band to perform.
Yeah.
And she was really stronger than she knew. That's how I felt by the end.
Yeah. As a former bando, talking to a former bando, what did you feel about the band and music representation and what was going on in this book?
I really liked how there was, I'm not gonna be able to remember her name, but there was a freshman girl that she knew from band that was really one of her first supporters outside of like her friend circle. And I was just like, oh, I remember that closeness, like that outside of, being in band, you might not have known each other at all, but because maybe you sat behind each other in band or something, you're in on inside jokes and you kind of form this closeness. Like that really took me back to that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that character was Melly,
I
like
think you're right.
Melly and
Yes, that
Catherine or
sounds
something.
right.
I enjoyed the fact that there was band in this, and that I really enjoyed the fact that Liz had strong feelings about being in band and also composing, and her friendships in band and music was like a really strong component of her life. I sort of wish there had been just a little bit more. I just felt like, I know that she wasn't in marching band, but at the same time, I felt like band was more consuming for my high school life than it was for Liz's. But I really enjoyed seeing this, like, kind of, a lot of people think of like the band kids as like the nerds, and I felt like there was still a lot of support for Liz, even though she was like this like nerd in band.
And the band instructor, they described him as being a younger teacher. He was really like one of her strongest like supporters. Like outside of prom, just like even before that, in her desires to go on and study music. And he really rallied for her at the college that she wanted to attend. He got in contact and got like another chance for her to try out, and he was really supportive of her before anything happened.
Yeah.
And I think that goes, you can see what an important role a teacher would have in her life too, outside of her friends and her family.
Yeah, he was a big advocate for her. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So overall, how did you like the book? Do you have any sort of final thoughts or takeaway points? And what's your final rating?
Well, I do have two takeaway thoughts before I give you my final rating. One of them being I had never read a book where the main character identified as LGBTQ plus, and I really felt like this book for me was a good introduction into that community. It gave me a little more understanding. And then my second thought is it has been a really long time since I read a book geared towards like really young adults, like high school. And I wish I'd realized more of that before going into it, because I feel like the book was really well done for someone a lot younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like when I say I'm going to give this book 2.5 stars, I feel like that's really harsh, but I want you to consider that I'm old now when you
Well, I mean, is 2.5 stars like a perfect, like 2.5 stars on a scale of 1 to 5 is right in the middle. So is that still like a good, review?
Yes, I thought it was good, and it was a good insight into Liz's life as a Black poor woman. That's how she describes herself, and also someone who identifies as queer. And I appreciated that look into her life. But in the end, everything was it was like it all just came together too perfectly for me. Like we have all these hard facts about her life, and then in the end, everything's just so
it still works out.
Yeah, and I was happy for her, and I'm not trying to say I don't think she deserved it, but it was just like in the end, it was all just tied up so neatly with a little bow, which is then the other part of me is like, isn't that what everybody wants at prom? Doesn't everybody want their prom to be perfect? And hers was perfect. Shouldn't I be happy for her? But everything was too perfect in the end for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I could see that that viewpoint. I enjoyed this. I realized just here in the last like couple months, I've read a lot more YA in the last like 3 months than I have probably in the last 3 years. It's probably about equal. And I felt like Liz read relatively maturely to me because I felt like she did have character growth, growth and arc. At the same time, there were definitely a lot of moments where I was like, oh, that's high school feels right there.
Yeah.
And like, there was a lot of like pop culture references, which I, for the most part, I understood and followed, but I did wonder like how well this book was going to hold up. Someone was reading it 10 years from now, like how many of those were just going to go over someone's head.
You know what I learned the other day that I didn't know, that they update things like that. Like in 10 years, they'd update it with different references, where the story would largely stay the same, but there'll be like the new edition, and they'll be talking about different music artists or different books or movies or something.
Huh. I could see that might be possible in certain, like an easy like throwaway one line, but like there's this one part where Jordan is talking to Liz and making a multiple paragraphs discussion about Avatar, and like that would be hard to eliminate. But I mean, I guess Avatar is like already a number of years old from now, so.
And it has quite a following, so there might still be a big following in 10 years.
Actually, my husband and I we're watching Avatar. We just finished it.
I was going to say, when these nerdy kids start having kids, their kids are going to like Avatar.
Yeah. I actually really liked it. It was really good. I would recommend it if you've never seen it.
I haven't.
Well, I mean, I would kind of recommend it, actually.
Okay. I'll check it out.
Okay. My final rating, that being said, back on track. My final rating, I would say I enjoyed it. My personal ratings are like mostly how I felt when I finished the book, and that's sort of where I plop the star. I do really enjoy having a discussion with somebody, because that usually does retroactively change my rating. Usually it brings it down a little bit, just because it's like someone else is being like, well, here's a couple little pinpricks in your balloon. So I think I would rate this book like a 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed it, but I do think that things were kind of wrapped up a little too perfectly. I felt like some of the side characters were a little bit too like one-dimensional. Like she had like a hippie friend called Stone who was just like, I'll align your chakras. And I was like, okay. And then like Jordan was just like too happy and perfect the whole time. And I just felt like there was all the sort of cliches. It felt like a Mean Girls where they were like, here are the bandos and here are the like hot Asians and here are the whatever. Like I felt like those groups were in this book and they like stayed in those lanes. So I felt like this book was
and
not
she
really
had like one friend from each group in her little group. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that this book was diverse, and I think that this book showed really good character development. Did I think it was stunning and amazing and blew me away? No. When I finished, I probably would have said like a solid 4 stars. And after this discussion, I think I'm going to go ahead and drop that down to like 3.5, 3.25, just because I don't know that it's going to be a book that's going to like stay with me forever and ever.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for this discussion. I really appreciate it. It's one of the things that I've really missed doing with you. And now everybody else gets to see it and be in a little thought in our little window into our minds here.
It was a good discussion.
It was. I enjoyed it. And so what do
you
think?
Have to pick the book next time.
Oh, yeah. So maybe next month we'll do something like this again. This time it'll be over on Laura's channel at Laura's Library Card.
That sounds great.
Thanks
for having me on.
Laugh at me.
I won't.
You are right now.
Okay.
Yellow leather, yellow leather.
These will be our bloopers. If this is something that we want to potentially do again, we could hint that is the case.
Do you want to do it again? I guess I should ask you now before I ask you. It's done.